1, 2, 3.
Yes, it's the Late Late Breakfast Show with your host, Bernie J. Mitchell.
Are you in?
Are you in?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're here in the At Work Hub's exclusive VIP podcast studio with Mrs. Future Worker in Clean Language herself. And I've fluffed up my intro already, so what are you known for and what would you like to be known for, Miss Rees?
My name's Judy Rees, and I'm known for clean language, which is a way of working with the metaphors that underpin people's thinking. I'd like to be known for the work I do with teams, particularly virtual teams, to help them work better together, communicate better, and generally make amazing stuff together, which actually uses the clean language stuff.
And a rare departure from my usual policy. Can you plug your ebook right at the beginning? Because there was a very interesting array of people there and how you made it.
So I've got two ebooks out at the moment. One is called Your Clean Language Questions Answered. So if you have no idea what clean language is, just Google for that book. I've also got one about collaboration dynamics and the metaphors that underpin collaboration. And what I did was, for a year, I interviewed different people about how they see collaboration, including Bernie, and basically found out when people are collaborating at their best, they're like what? I can't remember what you were like. A dolphin.
I was a dolphin, which I'd never thought of in my life before. We were doing this. We were at 90 Maynard and we were doing this workshop with Judy, and I suppose it was like 10 or 15 of us there, and we had to say what we felt like. And I never in my life would have thought I'm a dolphin when I'm working really well. And I still think about that. I actually found, keep meaning to tell you this, I found a picture, a Trello logo that incorporated a dolphin. So that's stuck on my computer in different places.
Yeah. So that kind of idea, when you know what, because metaphor is the stuff of unconscious thought. Human beings think in metaphor at a much, much deeper level than we think in words. You can exploit that to help people understand each other better. And in this ebook about collaboration dynamics, we find out that one person is like a dolphin, another person is like a fire, another person is like a boiling cauldron full of ideas, somebody else is a connector, somebody else, and the winning metaphor, the one that most people use, was the orchestral conductor.
Yep. And is that CEOs or is that
pretty much everybody on the podcast was a freelance of one kind or another. I didn't use many people who were in old style large organisations, which was perhaps a mistake, but it was what was interesting me at the time.
Why do you think it was a mistake?
Because we might have learned more about the array of metaphors that people use for collaboration if I'd interviewed a wider range of people.
So all the freelancer people were thinking this thing, and it turns out the people in. It's really hard not to be snarky about corporations, isn't it? Sorry. They were bazookas, and I see myself as a bazooka when I'm collaborating.
Well, I don't know yet, but what I realised recently is just how wildly different the thinking of people in old-style organisations can be. Mm-hmm. I managed, after a year of trying, to get a meeting with Matthew Taylor, who is the Chief Executive of the RSA, the Royal Society for the Arts, Manufactures and Commerce. Yep. And it was only last week, and we were sat there talking about this thing about the future of work, and he was slippery as an eel. You know, I wanted to know how he was. He was really enthusiastic a year or two ago about flat organisations, transparency, self-management, this.
He did the big. Did he host the Reinvented Organisations?
He hosted the two talks, the one with Josta Block and the one with Frederick Laloux, and he was wildly enthusiastic. He handed out copies of Frederick Laloux's book to everybody in the organisation. As a result of what he did, a bunch of us set up a network of fellows of the RSA in that world, and we met up with him last week, and to say he was, what's the word? I wouldn't say negative, but
done a 180.
At least a 90. Mm-hmm. So that instead of being all systems go, we're now flatlining.
Yeah.
And it was.
And you wanted to be horizontal, not flatlining.
Yeah.
Ta-dum.
Exactly. So I don't want to sort of reveal too many details in that meeting because it was a private meeting, but it was clear in that meeting that his thinking was very different to ours as freelancers. That for him it was very much about the bureaucracy, about the structure, about the control, about who controlled what, and he emphasised the slow-moving nature of the organisation, which, of course, a lot of this is all of it is going to be true. I mean, he's not a liar like certain other people we're thinking of at the moment. He's a truthful, honourable man, but the way he's thinking about his organisation is very different from the way I'm thinking about it. And maybe if I'd interviewed a wider range of people, I'd have got a wider range of examples.
That's it. Do you know who Jeff Sullivan is? Which maybe I should have briefed you before we announced it. So Jeff Sullivan has a quick... He was one of the guys that came up with the Agile Manifesto in 2001.
Oh yeah, got him. Yeah.
And he's best mates with the Toyota guys, and
yeah.
He in his book...
Jeff with a J.
Jeff with a J. And the book is called Scrum. I hate the title, and I always say this, and sorry if you've heard me say this millions of times, listeners. The book is called Scrum, How to Do Twice as Much in Half the Time, which gets people picking up to do twice as much in half the time, but it's actually the story of how he was in the army, and how he was in software, and how he was in research. Excuse me. And he was in the army, and then he was in software development, and then he rebuilt the FBI computer in, I can't remember the year, but the thing was, Lockheed Martin had spent £100 billion making this, and then he got it down to a small group of people working in a Scrum Agile fashion, and there was something like 34 people on the team, and they did stand-ups every day, and they treated it like a lean manufacturing thing. So they did do twice as much in half the time. And I would like to work in a big organisation like that, where people really are ducking and diving all the time, and I'm obsessed with the whole, the legend of Buffer and how they work. Yeah. That I really, really embrace.
The interesting question is, how do you get from where they are to where we would like them to be? And that's the challenge.
Do you think people have fads about this? Because I read a lot about Salesforce wanting to be like this, and I know people that, like, people in our road work, because we're in Ilford in Essex, it's full of tech people who work in tech companies in our road. They love working there. And they're not, they haven't drunk the Kool-Aid. They just really like working there. They get treated very well. Everything's, it's like working in. It's a big company, but it's like working in a little company. So they're doing that. But I'm just very suspicious of companies that have like a 3-year fad of something, like, Frederick and reinventing organisations. But very few people seem to carry that on for ages. Those people doing reinventing organisations were doing Six Sigma 10 years ago, 20 years ago?
That's the question. I mean, the ones that are in Lelou's book, I think, are all ones that have stayed the course. They've done it out of their owner's commitment to the idea. And this idea of a combination of evolutionary purpose, invitation to authenticity, and self-management has come about because the boss actually thinks that is the right way to do things, as well as being a profitable way to do things. So to do something like that requires a commitment. It's not just something to do on the crest of a wave. But I do think it is the future of work. I think it is where it's going, because if you're going, essentially, the current generation of younger people are coming through without starting in corporate jobs. Yep. So how is it that those people are going to join traditional organisations and enjoy it?
I tried to join a traditional organisation and I didn't enjoy it. It was only a hotel chain, but it nearly killed me even before I knew what Agile was.
My husband has said for years that he's completely unemployable. Even if he stopped being a business person on his own account, he couldn't go back and work in an old organisation.
What is it he couldn't do? Is it like, because I have that issue as well, but is it like being told what to do, or the stress of having to be somewhere for someone else just in case sometime?
he thinks it's because he would be too honest. He couldn't bring himself to lie. And this whole business of the theme of lying seems to be coming up. It's in the atmosphere after the Brexit vote on
the
Thursday.
zeitgeist, or whatever you call it.
Yeah, but he couldn't bring himself to lie. One of his highest values is honesty, authenticity.
Yeah.
And as far as he can see, in traditional old organisations, lying is absolutely how things are done, how things actually happen. I don't know whether you agree with that, but
I think there's some kind of lying. Like I've got many stories of people who work in larger organisations, and one springs to mind that they busted their gut for 15 years with that particular organisation, and they were quite high up in it. They were like they weren't in charge of the UK operation, but they were like, you know, the next one down. And then he turned up to work one day, and the American company had just taken the whole company out of the UK, and the doors were locked. And it wasn't they'd gone into receivership or something like that. They just decided to leave, and a week beforehand he'd been sitting down with the guy from the mothership, like everything was okay, and then they just left like that. And he got, I don't know, he didn't get a very favourable termination thing, and that's even though he hadn't done anything wrong. There was just like, this is what happens when we do it. And there was something around the buffer. I was reading a thread on Reddit or something like that about buffer, and there was the company that this guy worked for always talked about being part of the family and values and all that sort. And I worked for them ages ago, and I thought they kind of liked the idea of it, but they weren't really sure what they were saying themselves. And the thread about buffer said there's a difference between, like, you know, family and team. So if you're a family, if you think your company is like a family, you're going to have to one day sack someone from your family, which is different from sacking someone from your team, whether it's because they've done something wrong or whether it's because of an economic reason. And anyone who works in a business must realise that at some point the maths might not add up. So I was going somewhere with that and I've lost it. Family thread.
I don't know where
it. So yeah, he was. He was lied to because he was led to believe that everything was going on okay, and then like a week later, pulling out of 3 offices in the UK, and people turning up to find out they haven't got a thing anymore and their compensations in the post, and it was all done legally. It just wasn't done very nicely. It was a bit of a.
Yes. And I think trust is really, really important in business and in life. If you can't trust the people you're spending 8 hours a day with, not only can you not trust them, you're not expected to trust them. Trust is not part of the deal in a lot of traditional organisations. And if trust is important to you, and how important is trust to you? If you're working in the sharing economy, one assumes that trust is probably one of your higher values. I try not to go to sharing economy events anymore, but it's a thing that always comes up. And for me, it's as soon as people start talking about community, trust and authenticity, even though I think they're really, 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 really important, when I hear them in certain atriums, I want to stick a knife in my throat, because they're kind of like, we need to say these, and they're trust washing. That's the word, as in greenwashing. Yes.
Like, it's all about trust, and it gets a bit flaky.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this, the difference between working in a co-working place and working in a company, and this is what works for me. So it's unfair to dismiss everyone that works in a company as, not us. But we come into here in 90 Main Yard, and everyone sort of comes to work, but they're all working on different projects, and we're all in the same place. But what's always missing is, in a nice way, is they're coming in and putting on a show for everyone just to keep the job, or there's no one in charge here. It's a very, self-organised.
Authenticity is present because there's no reason not to be authentic.
Yeah. So when the boss comes in, there's no like, oh, hello, love your top. Is that your children?
Whereas even in large organisations, even ones which have embraced, for example, agile, trust is a really big deal, particularly with virtual teams. I've got a couple of colleagues who they've come from being agile coaches, but now their main theme is trust. And they go round and they do work with teams and they help them to develop trust, and they're all, metaphor. One of them was talking to me yesterday. He's started to introduce clear language stuff. So when, what's for you, trust is like what? I think that's going to be a really difficult question in his workshops. But if you don't have trust, things aren't going to work when you're, for example, working in a distributed way, when you're not physically co-located, because you can't keep an eye on each other. It's too easy when you're working at opposite ends of the earth to hide things from each other.
So how does that play out practically? Because I've built trust with people, and I've sabotaged trust with people. But sabotage, is that the right word? I know, broken trust with people, but I kind of know what to do now. It's not like I have a trust formula. I just know what I need to do and what I not need to do. But how do you deploy that in a company setting or a team setting?
I'm at one level, on a personal level, I'm currently in a feeling of I wish I knew, because last night at 10:30, I discovered that somebody who I trusted, who is a reasonably close ally in lots of ways, had stolen one of my ebooks and translated into French and had put his own name on the cover as the author. And, I didn't know where to go with that, apart from to send extremely angry emails telling him to take it down immediately. So I don't think there's an instant formula for creating trust, but I do think that it's... And people can always break trust, can't they? Even no matter what you do, you can break trust. But there are situations which make trust more likely. There are situations which make trust less likely. It's going to be more likely where you are physically co-located because you can see each other. It's going to be less likely when you're distributed. It's going to be more likely when there is less hierarchy. Trust is going to be more fragile where there's hierarchical relationships, where there's a lot of top-down dishing out orders.
Yeah, you're like pushing your fist down.
It's going to be that you're going to struggle with trust if there's hierarchical relationships between groups of workers. For example, doctors and nurses. I was just reading a thing yesterday about surgeons in this particular hospital were in the habit of ordering the nurses around in a really aggressive way. And a surgical nurse who said, "Hang on a moment, are you sure you've got the right leg?"
Is that in Drive?
It's in a number of a number of books. This particular book was called The Power of Habit.
Yes.
Yeah. But, if the nurse was to say, "Are you sure you've got the right leg that you're sawing off there?" They could get sacked for it. And in order to overcome that challenge, the entire organisation had to reshuffle itself to a much less hierarchical, a much more transparent, much more open
Is that why
structure.
they worked with the Formula One team to work on? There was a Great Ormond Street paediatric surgical handover team worked with the Ferrari Formula One team to work out how they made less mistakes as they went through. That might be something else. But.
Yeah, I think it's in a different book, but it makes perfect sense and the example that always gets trotted out is how the
F1.
No, the aeroplane industry, the aviation industry, basically stopped doing mistakes because they just set up a system of reporting such that you couldn't conceal a mistake anymore.
Yeah. So why is it, as you were saying there, I wanted to ask, I think, there's a bit of an echo chamber around whatever we're doing. So loads of stuff I read and the experience through WeShare and places like that the open, transparent, is just a much more refreshing, freer, more productive, more open, lovely environment to work in. But people still love bureaucracy in some place, and even though there seems to be overwhelming evidence over here. That it works like that. Why do people cling on to this? Why do they cling on to this like bureaucracy, many level?
Well, the power of habits. I mean, if we've been reading that book, habits are incredibly powerful. People like what is familiar. Whatever it is that you've developed as your familiar thing, you'll carry on doing that in default of, far longer than it's going to be useful. I think there's another piece around how constraint forces creativity, and people like constraints. There's a bit in this ebook about clean language, your clean language questions answered one, where I'm talking about how people want there to be rigid rules about how to use clean language. Everybody always asks, what are the rules of clean language? There are no rules, you make it up yourself. But they want them to be rules. They want rules because when there are rules, that means they don't have to take responsibility for their own action.
That is something I found delicious and very uncomfortable with WeShare and opening, and it's taken like 3 years of, I love all the ideas. Oh yeah, that's great. But then when it actually came to some projects, like you need to. People have said to me, you need to own this in the past, but then when you have to own something in WeShare, or there's no one to go to ask permission for. It took me like, in one particular thing, which I'll, get on a therapy bench one day and talk about, but it took me like a year to ask permission. So it took me a year to get this thing going because I was looking for the person in WeShare to ask permission to start it. Because of the habit. So I didn't even realise that. But
the same kind of thing is playing out in this RSA group, that basically people are looking around going, who should I ask? Mm-hmm. They want permission, but there's no one to ask.
So in that RSA group, how do people? If I could I'd love to come, but it just doesn't fit in with baby Bernie. But I'm pissed that it doesn't. So could I just turn up one day and go like, we're going to do this, and like in the context of that, would it be okay, or would I? Well,
one of the things we're teasing out is in that membership group is, well, what is okay and what's not okay. Mm-hmm. So we have a face-to-face meeting every 6 weeks, and we've got dates and we've got a venue, and that's all we know. At which point we then have to say, well, what are we going to talk about? And some people are arguing, well, we shouldn't have to set a theme, we shouldn't have to have a title, we shouldn't have to have a topic. We should just say we're going to be kind to each other and invite everybody to come. And I said, look, I'm not coming all the way across London on an evening to have a kind conversation with people about anything at all. I can do that in my local pub.
Yeah.
I've insisted there needs to be a theme, but I can insist until I'm blue in the face, but other people could insist the opposite. So one of the things we're playing with at our next meeting is, do we even need, we've got a theme, because we'd already agreed the theme for this particular meeting, but can we get away without having anybody saying, hello and welcome, and tonight our theme is da-da-da-da? Can we get away without anybody at the end saying, and by the way, if you want to find out more about us, we're on Facebook, and we need to be in the pub in 10 minutes, please put the chairs on one side. And in between, can we just leave it? Just put a sign on the wall saying, the theme we said for tonight is X.
And see what happens.
So we're going to try that and see what happens.
So I'd love that type of thing. I always worry about, there's this fine line between being a sergeant major and being an instigator in those situations.
And sometimes
or abdicating initiative.
Yeah, but sometimes someone needs to take the lead for anything to happen. So if I hadn't said to this guy at a bar in an RSA event, oh, look, you're interested in reinventing organisations, so am I. They want networks, shall we set it up? Nothing would have happened.
Yeah.
All sorts of interesting conversations that have happened since wouldn't have happened. Because nothing happens. If nobody takes an initiative, nothing happens. So one of the things that's going on for me at the moment, I'm trying to decide whether to stand for the RSA's Fellowship Council, which means stepping into the heart of bureaucratic committee land.
Ooh. I had a little shudder down my back when you said, I think committees are places where good ideas are lulled into and then quietly strangled.
But if I want to change a dinosaur organisation, if I really believe that's an important thing to do, this is a way I can do it. Do I care enough? It's a really interesting challenge because, the easy way is to spend my life just pottering around in the sharing economy and with other freelancers. The road less travelled is actually the one into bureaucratic committee land.
Yeah. Well, I have a similar thing in local, I'm not involved in local politics as in standing for anything, but every time I go to something, I think, someone should do something about this. And there are people doing something about it, but the thing is not, it will take too much of my time. It's the becoming one of them. That's the scary bit.
And can you go into these things without becoming one of them?
And I think that's we'll find out in the next episode. We'll leave that as a cliffhanger. So where can people find you online?
judyrees.co.uk.
Bing! Thank you very much.
Please go to berniejmitchell.com/podcast. Bernie would love your feedback and input.